Hi, I'm Terry Anderson, and I'd like to talk about my book, Bush's Wars, and give you some pointers on how to teach Bush's Wars. First is that your students were probably born in the mid-1990s, like my students, and the very first thing they might remember is 9/11, the impact of 9/11. And then they probably have an idea why we went to war in Afghanistan. There was this terrorist, Osama bin Laden, who sent those 19 hijackers to get those planes and then fly those planes in the World Trade Center into the Pentagon. And the Bush administration asked Afghanistan to give up Osama bin Laden, and they said no. So most people feel that the Afghanistan conflict was a very justifiable war. But ask your students how many of those 19 hijackers were from Iraq, and they'll be stunned by the answer. 0. 0 were from Iraq. And ask them then, why did we go to war against Iraq? And that is answered in Bush's Wars, and also how we tried to fight the war in Iraq, what were our strategies and our tactics, and what were the problems, and how those changed over this long 8-year war. I also try to bring up the whole idea of the Bush Doctrine. Why had we gone to war throughout the 20th century? World War I, German submarines attacking American ships. World War II, Pearl Harbor. And then the Korean War. North Korea attacks our ally, South Korea. And then the Vietnam. North Vietnam attacks our ally, South Vietnam. And then Kuwait. Bush Sr. is responding to Saddam Hussein, who has attacked and taken over Kuwait. We're simply going to liberate it. And I bring up the Bush Doctrine, which was announced in 2002. This said that the United States now had the right for a preemptive strike against another country, just if we felt that we were threatened. If we were threatened. What a radical departure. I also like to bring up the idea of the imperial presidency. This, of course, started with Franklin Roosevelt in World War II, but that was a declared war, and he had a tremendous amount of power. Ever since, presidents have also had a lot more power than they had before World War II, and they have often used that power. What happened to the balance of powers in America? Then I ask, what happened to the media? Generally speaking, the media traditionally have questioned the administration, especially when we're talking about something as dangerous as war. But what happened in 2002 and early 2003? What happened, generally speaking, was that the newspapers were simply reporting what the Bush administration stated. Wow. You realize a year after the war started, in the summer of 2004, both the New York Times and the Washington Post came out and apologized for not questioning the Bush administration. And then I like to bring out the whole idea of how gullible the American people were. I mean, some of the statements the Bush administration were making, wow, that there's unmanned aerial vehicles and they are off the east coast of the United States and they're going to attack with all kinds of toxic chemicals, and how many Americans are going to die, as if we don't have a Navy, we don't have a Coast Guard, we don't have satellites, we don't have an Air Force. How gullible were the American people? I've often told my students over the last 30 years that a baby boomer president who lived through Vietnam would never ever get America involved in an unnecessary war. And Iraq, unfortunately, was an unnecessary war. And finally, I like to use novels when I teach. And for Afghanistan, I suggest The Warlord's Son. This is about that son who falls in love, and so there's a lot of romance, how women are treated in the tribal areas of Afghanistan and Pakistan. It is a great mystery. And if you want one on Iraq, I use Kevin Powers' The Yellow Birds, about what happens to an American who goes over, fights Iraq, and then comes home. Thank you very much.